welcome to Just a Little Bit. Just a little bit of information that comes from the West Side Gazette, Broward County's oldest and largest black-owned and operated newspaper. This week, we're going to do something just a little different. Okay, we understand that it is election time. We just got over with the primaries, and we're going to come back and deal with that. But right now, I want to bring some praises and some eyes to our young folk. So in this week's edition, Growing Our Voices of the Future, there are two articles in there, two pretty good articles, and they're coming from some young writers. One in particular is Ransom Johnson. Ransom Johnson is a young elementary student, and Ransom thought he would write about why he thought Kamala Harris would be the ideal candidate, should I say, vice presidential candidate for Joe Biden. And in his article, he points out some very interesting observations. So check out Ransom Johnson. Here's why I think Joe Biden made the right decision for vice president in this week's edition. Also, Miss Layla Davison. Layla is one of our seasoned writers. She's been with the paper for a long time, ever since the inception of Growing Our Voices. And she writes this week about, again, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. If our young folk can see the seriousness of what is transpiring in our political arenas, then us as adults need to pay attention to what they're saying and what they're doing. Also, there's an appeal in this week's issue. The appeal comes from Miss Hortensia Williams. Now, Miss Williams, she's the daughter of Reverend Arthur Williams and Verdelia Williams. She contacted one of our reporters to find out some information concerning her mother. She wants help. Her mother was a nurse at Provident Hospital, which was the only hospital for blacks. So she's trying to find any information she can. So if you have any information on her mother, who was a nurse for Dr. James F. Sistrunk. She graduated from Dillard High School in 1963. If you would contact Roberto Fernandez at 954-235-5623 and get him that information so he can get it back to Miss Williams' daughter. Also, in this week's edition, there's another situation, one proud moment, and it's coming from one of our first black city officials, Mr. James O. Hill, and it's about his granddaughter and her recent graduating from college. So these articles are concerning our young folk that we really need to pay attention to and encourage them to get involved not only in the political arena, but in life in general. Okay. Okay. Forgot what I said. Yeah, we really need to get our young people involved in politics, but not only politics, in life in general, and understanding our significance of what we are supposed to do in terms of loving and being a part of each other's lives and accomplishments. Don't forget to join in each week in the coloring contest of Sherry and Chubby. It's a comic strip that has been presented by one of our educators in the Broward County school system. It's quite interesting. During this COVID pandemic time, it's an excellent activity, a family activity. Bring the kids and the adults. Get out the old Crayola crayons and have a good time. Thank you. It's a beautiful thing when we discover our history. 40 on the 40, 40 seconds on the history, faith, strength, and endurance of black people. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about just a little bit Eatonville. Eatonville, Florida is the oldest black incorporated municipality in the United States. It was incorporated in 1887. It is the first town successfully established by African American freemen. The founding of this town stands as an enormous achievement for once enslaved black men and women throughout the United States. There you have it, 40 on the 40. Welcome back to Just a Little Bit. And on this segment, we're having a young gifted artist, a cartoonist, if you will, a coloring book extraordinaire, Miss Justice Foster. Can we welcome her to the stage, please? Yay! Well, Justice, what's happening?
I'm good.
You good?
How are you?
You all right?
Yes.
All right, so tell us a little bit about you.
My name is Justice Foster. I'm 14 years old, and I'm a freshman at Dillard High School. And I like to draw and basically just create things.
You like to draw and create things, huh?
Yes.
So what inspired you to do that? What motivated you to want to draw and just do stuff like that?
Well, my mom's really creative, so that's how I got into creating things. But I started teaching myself how to draw in about 4th or 5th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just coloring and drawing just to see if I can do it.
Did you keep some of your stuff when you were 4 and 5 years old? Did you keep any of that stuff? Because that's going to be a keepsake.
Well, my mom did. She kept some drawings that I drew for her specifically, but other than that, I don't think so.
What's that you got over there?
This is the You Are Enough coloring and activity book that I created earlier this year.
Let me back up. That's your creation.
Yes,
Okay, and what's the title of your creation?
You Are Enough.
And how did you come up with that title?
It's basically the reason why I even created the book in the first place, to teach young black girls that they are enough, since they're not represented enough in these industries like coloring books. You don't get to see a lot of young black girls in coloring books.
Wow, Justice, you're impressing me. I'm serious. So this title of this book, you was inspired because you said that young black girls are. Tell me that one more time.
That they aren't represented enough.
Okay, aren't represented enough. Oh, so what else do we have in this coloring book?
We have some just drawings that you can color, and then activities that represent the drawings.
Okay, when you say activities that represent the drawing, now since your book is about inspiring and creating self-esteem for black girls, the activities coincide with the drawings?
Yes.
Give me an example.
This one, mostly, it has hearts on the background, basically representing self-love, and then with the activity, you create a daily affirmation for yourself. Like, you can say, I am beautiful, I am creative, I am smart, or you can say, I am enough.
Uh-huh. So the hearts here represent what you said?
Self-love.
Self-love. So you have to love, well, I should ask you, should you love yourself first?
Yes.
And what's so important about that?
You can't love anybody else or anything else if you don't love yourself first.
Okay, now you also mentioned affirmations.
Yes.
Okay. So away from this, what's one of your daily affirmations?
One of my main daily affirmations would probably be, I am intelligent because I do a lot of schoolwork and online work.
I think that's great. For those of you who can't see, in this her book, her creative coloring book, and her affirmations, this is some deep stuff here. I am, and you add in your blank to what you are.
Yes.
Okay, so if I were to create an affirmation for me, I would say, I am a black man.
Yes.
I am a positive black man. I am love, because in order for me to love, I have to love myself first.
Yes.
So that's what you just taught me.
Yes.
Okay, what else do you do? What else do you like to do?
Um, besides drawing,
Yeah, besides drawing.
I like to dance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and watch TV.
Okay, I remember seeing you. In a program over at Art Serve.
Yes.
Yeah, you were probably you're 14 now, so you had to be maybe 11.
About 11
About-
or 12.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Justice, your coloring book is truly remarkable. And how can somebody get this book? What can they do to get that book?
You can purchase it online. You can go to my Facebook page, Young Gifted and Fly, and find the link and purchase it there.
Okay. Young, gifted, and fly.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we want to have you back. You know, this is such a short time, and you're so creative. I know there's a lot more that you want to talk about, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we got to have you back. Justice Foster, an up-and-coming artist, a coloring book extraordinaire, and a self-motivator.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Just a Little Bit. You know, before we move any further, we're going to roll two segments into one. Our Sankofa moment, where we go back to get our history, and what's up. We're going to make it all one thing. But I also want us to be mindful that coronavirus is not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, Georgia, Florida, and Texas leads the nation in new coronavirus cases per capita, and is still wreaking havoc. But right now, we're going to take a look at politics, and we're going to look at it through the eyes of one of the great data people that we have here in Broward County. And he's not new to the set. He's been here before, and he has educated us and enlightened us to a lot of things as it pertains to data and how this data is used. And also in this episode, he's going to talk about a very interesting point in how a young lady lost a race from his perspective. Okay, so let's welcome to the stage Mr. Perry Busby, the data guru. What's up, Perry?
How you doing,
Man, I'm terrific and getting better.
Great,
So
great.
let's talk a little bit about, this just most recent election here in Broward County. Elections.
Pretty exciting election. In some ways, and in some ways it was pretty predictable. But yeah, it was an interesting election.
What did you find most interesting about these elections, Perry? Was there anything that jumped out at you the most?
Well, when we came out of early voting, one thing that was pretty prevalent was that we were on target to pretty much meet the same results that we had in March, and we were on target to meet the same. We were on target to beat the turnout in 2018 for the August primary. So that was interesting in the sense that we were going to, that it looked like there was going to be more support. But one of the things that was really most important that I noticed coming out of early voting, and that was between vote by mail and early voting, you were pretty much looking at the majority of the same people who had voted in March. So in March, where we may have had 90,000 people, or should I say we had 96,000 people to vote by mail and approximately 60,000 to early vote, by the time early voting was over on Sunday, we had over 190,000 people early voting, and close to, I think it was 40,000 people. So early voting went down, vote by mail went up, and what you saw on election day was the last few, which was primarily Republican people, because most Democrats voted by mail and Republicans went in person. So On election day, I think we may have had maybe 30 or 40,000 people to show up, and that was mostly Republicans.
Is anything happening? Is it SSDD, same stuff, different day? So I mean, what is going on? Is there an increase? Are we seeing any difference?
Yeah, we saw a modest increase. We saw a modest increase. Like I said, we beat the returns. Well, there was an increase over 2018, and there was an increase over March. But that increase was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 people. And when you look at the turnout versus the number of registered voters, it's still the same because the turnout for yesterday's election was 25%.
25%, and that seems to be the margin, I guess, the plateau that people seem to vote in primary elections.
Yes.
How does this affect, or how will this affect November?
Well, it's hard to say, and I had a funny incident that I overheard the other day. I heard a young lady and her friend talking about voting, and the young lady said, "Well, I didn't vote, but that's okay. This wasn't the real one." And I said, "Oh, excuse me, young man, ma'am, all elections are real. There is no let's wait." So what you're going to see is a big increase, and it's unfortunate because yesterday's race impacts us more locally than it will in November. And so to find out that our representatives, whether Republican or Democrat, our representatives are being determined by 25% of the electorate, and that's terrible.
25% of the people dictates to what happens to the rest of the 75 of the percent.
Right.
So Perry, I did something that I've never done before. I went out and I actually videoed the tapes from a poll.
Right.
I know if it's my first time doing it, I know there's a lot of other people that haven't engaged themselves in this depth of voting. And you always say that it's more to voting than just casting your vote.
Right.
What give us some more insight to that.
Yeah, our casting a ballot or voting is really just the participation side of voting. But voting all through history, any advancements we've made in voting has come through involvement. So voting is more about involvement than it is participation. Although it's going to be a few people who get involved and a mass amount of people who will participate, because that's what happened. It was a few people who focused on voting rights. Some gave their life for it. We got voting rights, and so we are the recipients, but we act like we're just participants.
I wonder how many out there listening have ever went to the polls after the polls were closed to look at the tape that comes from the polling places. I was really inspired by that. I had an opportunity to see how many people voted for a particular candidate, and it's all right there for you to see. So that's one thing that was new to me.
Right, yeah, and it's part of the state law. They are required to post that information. The problem is when they post that information, most of us are at home with our feet up looking at the TV, or we are at some watch party celebrating, and I don't know why we're celebrating because we don't have numbers. We're pretty much a pawn in this process to some degree, and so if there's one thing that I hope that we can rejuvenate, and that is the idea that government is citizen-led. It's not elected official led, it's not party led, it is citizen-led government.
Yeah, okay, now I'm gonna switch up a little bit. One thing I saw, we had 4 incumbent Congress people, and had some opposition from the progressive side, but yet and still those 4 incumbent won. What is that? What is that telling us? What is that saying?
The one thing I've learned is that no matter how much unrest there is, people always tend to view the unrest with the other people or the other party and take an attitude that my person or the person who I voted for is doing the best they can. And so no one wants to admit, I may have picked a dog candidate and they not doing. And so what happens during elections is it takes a while, but if an incumbent totally just messes up with his constituency, then you'll see a change. But for the most part, people talk about change, but it's only a few that happen because people tend to be creatures of nature.
Okay, let's come a little closer. Okay, we had a state race with the known incumbent, 2 known incumbents, and you had some young folk that ran against those incumbents, and they garnered a lot of votes. So what are we missing?
Well, for one, I'm glad that we saw these young candidates take a shot, because that has always been one of the elephants in the room when it comes to black politics, and that is you give these incumbents wide breath, and I feel that every incumbent should be challenged. Why is it that if you don't get a challenge, you end up thinking you own this seat, and that's not what we want. I was excited about these new challengers, and one race in particular, well, really 2 races in particular. What I found interesting about it was really, first, let's start here.
Okay, go.
I was amazed that the headline coming out of last night was about these 4 black guys getting elected. Well, really not 4 guys, but it was 4 black elected officials, as if, wow, how did Broward do that? But when you look at that, when you consider Sheriff Tony, Gordon Weeks, Brenda Foreman, and Harold Pryor, while they would say that, ooh, wow, this was indicative of a black vote, we all know that most of those races were splintered among black people. So how is it that we're talking about these black elected officials when, if you do a drill down, you're going to see that Sheriff Tony was able to carve out black votes, as well as establish his base. Brenda Foreman hadn't done a bad job, and I think that, just again, whether you want to say she ran on name alone, but she ran on a name that hadn't caused any problems, unless you on Facebook or something. But and then Harold, I think, ran one of the most interesting races, and that was because he did go to the community. And I think out of all of them, Harold probably carved out the most in terms of black votes than any of them. So I think it'll be much easier for them going into November. Okay. But I think those races were interesting, and the fact that we're talking about 4 black elected officials as if it was indicative of a black vote that wasn't there.
Wake up and smell the coffee.
Right.
Okay. I was talking to a political person, if you will, and he was telling me that I really felt bad for Scott Israel. All of those black people came out and voted for Scott Israel, and no white people did it. You know, and it's, so you know.
It's the funny part of politics. One of the races, I think there's still two interesting races. And we were talking about young black candidates.
Don't be running away from my question, man. Why you dodging that one?
we gonna leave the sheriff's race alone.
Okay,
we'll come back to that one.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the race in State Representative 99, where you had Jasmine Rogers Shaw against Anika Onfroy, as well as I want to say the district right. No. In Bobby Dubos's district. Bobby, of course, came away, with an easy win. But he had a young challenger, Elijah Manley, a young man who just felt like he wanted to get in and do something. And so I had a chance to meet with him and talk to him. A very insightful young man, but this was his first opportunity. And it says, it made me think about something my dad said. My dad was a Baptist pastor, and one thing that my dad always told me was that it didn't matter what Sunday he got up to preach, he always knew at least 20% of the congregation wasn't with him. His thing was to inspire and encourage and empower the 80% who were with him, because that 80% was always the quiet people, the ones who were for you, but they weren't fighting. You were always fighting the 20%. And so I think what Manley showed, again, in Bobby's case, was just that, you have people that aren't with you. In the Onfroy, Jasmine Rogers Shaw race, it was much closer, and the two things those two races had in common that I think Jasmine didn't understand and Elijah didn't understand was that they were running in what was called universal primary contest. Universal primary contest. And what that means, Florida is a closed primary state. If you're Republican, you have to vote Republican. If you're in a race that is a universal primary race, that means that all the contestants in the primary are in one party. And that contestant that comes out of that primary will not have a contestant in November. So when that happens, Democrats and Republicans can choose.
Jump cross, yes.
Right. It's not a jump cross. It'll be on a Republican ballot. And so when
Republican ballot. Okay.
Right, because it's a universal primary contest. There were no Republicans in 95. There were no Republicans in Bobby's and Elijah Manley's race. So, to be fair to the voter, you have to give them a choice. And so if they didn't have a Republican choice, state law says you get to choose out of this list here. And so the same thing would have applied if it was a list of all Republicans and we didn't have a Democrat to run, then Democrats have a chance to vote in that race. And so Jasmine's race was really funny in the sense, and I mean funny kind of weird, but about 2 or 3 weeks before early voting started, Anika started running an ad, and it was about schools or something. I forgot what it was about, but it was, you could tell it was a Republican-backed advertisement for Anika. And everyone called Anika on it, and Jasmine.
Maybe that's why we didn't get it in our publication.
Well, it was out there. It was out on social media.
No, I'm saying I'm saying specifically.
Yeah.
I ain't skirting around that.
Yeah, no. Jasmine brought it to light in the sense that she says, "Oh wow, look y'all, she's getting Republican money, and how can you count on her if she's getting Republican money?" And that sounds good when you talking to the folk in the hood. But when you're running for a race, you're running for all the people. And if you didn't know that you were in a universal primary race and you didn't take the time to go talk to Republicans, again,
Education.
you got to understand. As they say, don't hate the player, hate the game. And if you don't know the rules of the game, you'll get suckered. Okay. And unfortunately, I think that made the difference in the Roger Shaw and Onfroy case, is that Anika did take the effort to go get some Republicans, and that made the difference.
Okay, well, we're going to come back to that. You know, we're going to let that go because I still maintain that maybe that's why. But anyway, that's another. As always, Mr. Busby, it's great to have you here, man, to discuss issues that are really relevant.
Yeah.
And politics seem to be a sticky thing, so we need to talk about it more.
Well, and if I can, I do want to do one quick plug. Stick a pin in it. On Labor Day, September 7th, the West Side Gazette is going to host a series called 2-Minute Warning. And it's a 2-minute warning to educate and explain to voters what they need to do to prepare in these perilous times to ensure that their vote is counted and that their results have some accuracy. And so we're going to give people some tools that they could use. You heard Mr. Henry talk about a poll tape. Those are one of the tools. And so we're going to share it with people across the country so that we can feel comfortable about our results, because we're dealing with an administration that has no limits. Donald Trump will go as low as he can go, and so we have to ask ourselves, how far are we willing to go to stop him?
Very good. You heard it first. 2-minute warning coming at you, Labor Day. Thank you, Mr. Busby, and we look forward to engaging in some more conversation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just a Little Bit is brought to you in part by Destination Sistrunk, Broward County's Cultural Division and Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau. Destination Sistrunk is a door to explore Black history and heritage in Greater Fort Lauderdale. For more information, please visit www.destinationsistrunk.com. Remember, it's good in the hood.